Mars has been lying to us for decades. We looked at that cold, dry, dead-looking red rock in the sky and told ourselves the story was simple. Mars tried to be Earth, failed, dried out, and died. Case closed. But NASA just pulled apart that story completely. Because what they found hidden inside Mars, deep beneath that rust-colored surface, is something that should not exist. Something so enormous, so complex, and so Earth, like that, scientists are now rewriting everything they thought they knew about the red planet. And the more they find, the more one question keeps rising to the surface. Did something live there? Let us go through this piece by piece. Because the discoveries piling up right now about Mars are not small. They are not minor footnotes buried in a scientific journal. They are the kind of findings that shift the entire direction of planetary science. And they are all happening at the same time, in the same place, pointing at the same extraordinary possibility. Start with what was published on June 26, 2026. Just weeks ago, researchers from the University of Oxford published a study in the journal Nature Astronomy revealing something extraordinary hidden inside Mars. Using seismic data collected by NASA's InSight lander, scientists found a hidden boundary roughly 24 kilometers, or about 15 miles, beneath the Martian surface. At that depth, seismic waves generated by Marsquakes were behaving strangely, slowing down and bending in a way that revealed a distinct chemical transition layer. Below a certain depth, the rock was behaving like a completely different material. What they found was a thick layer of ultramafic rock, a dense, ancient material that forms when magma slowly cools and the heaviest minerals sink toward the bottom. Below this layer, at around 38 kilometers depth, sits the actual boundary between the crust and the mantle. The discovery revealed that Mars once had a 14-kilometer thick zone of melt-depleted cumulate rock sitting just above the mantle. That is not simply an interesting geological footnote, that is the signature of something far more dramatic. Lead author Dr. Tobias McKay, champion of the University of Bristol, said it plainly, explaining that scientists had traditionally assumed volcanism on Mars was relatively simple compared to Earth. But this discovery suggests Mars could sustain massive, long-lived magmatic systems capable of evolving and reprocessing molten rock throughout the crust. The researchers called this phenomenon transcrustal magmatism. And here is the critical detail. Previously, this exact process had only ever been identified on Earth. That is the jaw-dropping part of this finding. Transcrustal magmatism is how Earth builds its complex continental crust. It is a vertically integrated system where magma pushes up from deep in the mantle, collects in underground reservoirs at different depths, differentiates into different chemical compositions as it cools, and gradually constructs the kind of layered, chemically evolved rock that makes up the foundations of Earth's continents. This process was thought to require plate tectonics, the constant movement of Earth's outer shell that drives magma upward and circulates material through the crust over millions of years. Mars has no plate tectonics. Mars never had plate tectonics. And yet Mars appears to have built exactly the same kind of complex magmatic plumbing system anyway. The study also revealed something even more dramatic about the scale of what was found down there. The seismic boundary detected at roughly 24 kilometers depth is not confined to one spot beneath the InSight lander. Orbital data from spacecraft observing Mars from above have detected that same 20 to 24 kilometer depth boundary in seismic profiles across much of the northern hemisphere of Mars. This means the magmatic system may not be a local feature at all. It may have extended for hundreds, possibly thousands of kilometers across much of the planet's interior. This was not one lonely volcano sitting above a localized hotspot. This appears to have been an interconnected network of enormous, evolving magma reservoirs stretching across a huge portion of the planet, potentially active for billions of years. Oxford University stated officially that this geological process is closely linked to how planets develop atmospheres, oceans, and potentially habitable environments. On Earth, this kind of geological recycling helps regulate climate and supports the long-term cycling of water and other volatile elements. Scientists had long assumed plate tectonics were essential for creating these exact conditions. This Mars discovery suggests that assumption may simply be wrong. Planets can apparently build complex geology, complex chemistry, and the conditions needed for habitability without plate tectonics at all. The rule book for where life could exist in the universe just got quietly rewritten. But this is only the beginning, because while the magma story is already stunning on its own, it connects directly to another discovery, made just months earlier, that took the scientific world completely by surprise. In September 2025, NASA made an announcement. It described as one of the most significant findings in the history of Mars exploration. Their Perseverance rover, which landed in Jezero crater back in February 2021, had been investigating a reddish banded rock the science team nicknamed Cheyava Falls, after a waterfall in the Grand Canyon. The rock was about 1 meter long and 60 centimeters wide, entirely unremarkable from a distance. But when Perseverance turned its instruments on it, what came back changed the entire conversation about Mars. Inside Cheyava Falls, the rover detected a distinctive pattern of mineral deposits. Millimeter-sized, irregularly shaped light patches were scattered across the central band of the rock, each one surrounded by a thin, dark ring. Scientists named them leopard spots, and the minerals making up those spots were not random. They were vivianite, a hydrated iron phosphate, and greyjite, an iron sulfide, two specific minerals arranged in a highly structured repeating pattern. NASA's science team published their findings in a peer-reviewed paper describing the leopard spots as chemical reaction fronts, places where ancient chemistry drove oxidation and reduction reactions, exactly the kinds of reactions that on Earth are often powered not by random geological processes, but by microbial life. On Earth, vivianite commonly forms in environments rich in decaying organic matter. On Earth, greyjite is produced by specific types of microbes that use sulfate for energy. The arrangement of these two minerals in concentric, structured patterns at the microscopic level is a signature that planetary scientists specifically associate with biosignatures, chemical fingerprints left behind by living organisms. Nicola Fox, who at the time headed NASA's Science Mission Directorate, said publicly that this was the closest scientists had ever come to discovering ancient life on Mars. Those are not casual words. That is the head of NASA Science stating plainly that a rock already drilled and sampled by the Perseverance rover contains patterns that look more like the work of ancient microbes than anything observed before. To be clear about what scientists actually claim, they do not call this proof. They call it a potential biosignature. And they have spent considerable effort trying to rule out a purely geological explanation, testing every chemical and thermal alternative they can think of. A study published in September 2025 in the journal Nature found no particularly strong evidence supporting any purely abiotic explanation. Every non-biological theory came with significant unresolved problems. The biological explanation, while unconfirmed, remained the cleanest fit for what scientists were actually observing. Then, in June 2026, things escalated again. A new study published in the journal Science Advances confirmed that rocks in the Bright Angel Formation in Jezero crater, very close to where Cheyava Falls was found, contain macromolecular carbon, abbreviated MMC, large, complex networks of carbon atoms. On Earth, MMC is commonly found in two specific places: inside rocks containing fossilized biological carbon, and inside certain meteorites. The Perseverance study described this detection as an unambiguous confirmation of organics on Mars. Critically, the location matters enormously here. These are not random organic molecules scattered arbitrarily around the crater. They are concentrated specifically in rocks from what was once an ancient lakebed, in a geological layer rich in clay minerals that only form in the presence of water, right next to the rocks containing the leopard spot patterns. The picture forming across multiple independent studies is genuinely striking. An ancient lake, water-rich clay minerals, complex organic carbon compounds, structured mineral patterns associated with microbial chemistry on Earth, and a subsurface that, as the latest research shows, was once rich with active magmatic systems capable of providing the heat energy needed to keep water liquid underground for billions of years. Which brings us to the underground water story, because this is the layer of the Mars puzzle that ties everything else together. In 2024, researchers analyzing seismic data from NASA's InSight mission published a finding that stopped the planetary science community cold. They found evidence that between roughly 7 and 12 miles below the surface of Mars, seismic waves were slowing down in a very specific way, consistent with the presence of liquid water trapped in porous rock, much like an aquifer here on Earth. The layer was so extensive that if all that liquid water were spread evenly across the entire surface of Mars, it would cover the planet in a global ocean between half a mile and over a mile deep. Scientists at Australian National University and the Chinese Academy of Sciences later found supporting evidence for the same claim using a separate seismic dataset. Researchers from NYU Abu Dhabi published a study in March 2026 in the Journal of Geophysical Research, confirming that ancient sand dunes in Gale Crater had been hardened by groundwater moving through them long after Mars's surface lakes and rivers had already dried up, meaning the underground water system persisted for far longer than anyone had expected. Together, these findings tell a completely different story about Mars than the one most of us grew up learning. Mars did not simply dry out and die. Its water moved. When the surface became too cold and the atmosphere too thin to keep liquid water stable above ground, billions of years of accumulated water slowly drained downward, flowing into fractures in the crust. Created by the enormous meteorite bombardment Mars suffered early in its history. That water sank deep enough that residual geothermal heat from the interior kept it liquid. And based on the seismic data, a significant portion of it may still be liquid today, right now, sitting between 7 and 12 miles beneath the Martian surface, in a vast, cold, dark, possibly ancient aquifer. The implications for astrobiology here are staggering. On Earth, microbes live in underground rock fractures, miles beneath the surface, in total darkness, at extreme temperatures and pressures, with no connection whatsoever to the surface world above them. These deep subsurface microbes were first discovered in gold mines in South Africa more than a mile underground, surviving by consuming chemical energy produced when water reacts with surrounding rock, a process scientists call radiolytic hydrogen production, where natural radiation splits water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. That hydrogen becomes food, and the microbes can survive for potentially millions of years in complete isolation, cut off entirely from sunlight and the surface biosphere. If Mars has a vast liquid water aquifer at 7 to 12 miles depth, and if the rocks within that aquifer contain radioactive elements the way Martian rocks demonstrably do, then the exact chemical conditions needed for this kind of deep, subsurface microbial life could exist on Mars right now, not in the ancient past, but today. When Mars had its global magnetic field billions of years ago, it also had a thicker atmosphere. And with that thicker atmosphere came surface pressure high enough to keep liquid water stable on the surface. We can see evidence of that ancient water everywhere we look on Mars today. Dried riverbeds, ancient lake sediments, enormous outflow channels carved by floods. That must have been genuinely catastrophic. Jezero Crater, where Perseverance is exploring right now, was once a lake with rivers flowing directly into it. During that ancient period, Mars had liquid water on its surface, warmth from active volcanic systems, the very same transcrustal magmatic systems the June 2026 Oxford study just revealed, and chemical complexity generated by active geology constantly producing new minerals and new sources of energy. It had a protective magnetic field keeping surface radiation at survivable levels. By every metric planetary scientists used to define habitability, ancient Mars was habitable. Not maybe habitable. Not borderline habitable. By the actual working definitions used in planetary science today, early Mars was a genuinely habitable world. More recently, the Perseverance rover found something nobody fully expected when it zapped pale rocks in Jezero Crater with its onboard laser. Results presented at the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in 2026 showed microscopic grains of corundum inside those rocks. On Earth, corundum is the mineral that forms rubies and sapphires. The detection was surprising, not for any monetary reason, but because corundum requires very specific formation conditions, chemistry very high in aluminum and very low in silicon, typically forming either at extremely high temperatures or in association with tectonic processes, conditions that should not easily apply to a tectonically inactive planet like Mars. And yet there it was, confirmed by laser spectroscopy, sitting inside rocks in Jezero crater. The Mars we thought we understood keeps revealing chapters we never knew existed. Now let us pull everything together. We have a Mars that once had a vast, interconnected magma system running deep through its crust for potentially billions of years, something previously thought possible only on Earth. We have a Mars that once had liquid water covering parts of its surface, fed by rivers and filling lakes and craters like Jezero. We have a Mars with a solid inner core surrounded by a liquid outer core, structurally similar to Earth in fundamental ways. We have a Mars that, based on seismic data, currently has a massive liquid water aquifer sitting between 7 and 12 miles underground, potentially containing enough water to cover the entire planet's surface in an ocean up to a mile deep. We have a Mars where Perseverance found a rock called Cheyava Falls, covered in leopard spot patterns made of two minerals specifically associated with microbial life on Earth, where every purely geological explanation for those patterns runs into significant problems. We have a Mars where complex organic carbon molecules, the kind found on Earth, inside rocks containing biological fossils, have been confirmed right next to where the leopard spots were discovered. And we have a Mars that never truly gave up its water, but hid it underground in liquid form where it may still exist today. The traditional story of Mars was that it was Earth's tragic neighbor, a planet that almost made it but failed. Too small to hold an atmosphere, too cold to keep water, too geologically simple to maintain the complexity life needs, dead, frozen, and barren. That story is gone now. What the data published across 2025 and 2026 describes instead is a planet that is deeply, stubbornly, surprisingly complex, a planet that built Earth like geology without Earth's usual tools, a planet that kept its water even after losing everything else, by moving it underground into a vast hidden reservoir that may still exist today. The question scientists are asking now is not whether Mars was once habitable. That question is essentially settled. It was. The question now is whether life, if it ever started there, ever truly stopped, or whether something found a way to retreat underground into that aquifer and is still there today, sealed off from the universe above for billions of years. We cannot answer that question yet. The drilling technology needed to reach 7 to 12 miles into Martian rock does not exist today. The Mars Sample Return Mission, which would bring Perseverance's collected rock samples, including Cheyava Falls, back to Earth for proper laboratory analysis, is currently facing serious funding pressure. The answers may already be sitting in rocks Perseverance has already drilled and in the deep subsurface of a planet roughly 140 million miles away. We simply need to reach them. What NASA has found hidden inside Mars is not one simple story. It is 5 or 6 interconnected discoveries, all published within months of each other, all pointing in the same direction, toward a planet far more geologically alive than we ever assumed. A planet that hid its water underground rather than losing it entirely, and a planet whose rocks contain chemical fingerprints closely associated with the processes we connect with life. The surface of Mars tells one story: red, cold, and desolate. But everything NASA has found inside it, through seismic waves, laser instruments, and careful chemistry, tells a completely different story. One that says Mars is not finished revealing its secrets. And the most important discoveries about our neighboring planet are not sitting safely in the past. They are being published right now, argued over right now, by scientists closer than any humans in history, to finally answering the question that has haunted us since we first looked up and saw that red dot moving slowly across the night sky. If this story genuinely fascinated you, if the idea of a hidden ocean and possible ancient life sitting just miles beneath the Martian surface gave you chills, then do not scroll past without hitting that subscribe button, because this channel exists specifically to bring you real, verified, mind-expanding discoveries happening at the very edge of human knowledge. Drop a like on this video right now if you believe Mars once hosted life, and let us know in the comments whether you think something might still be surviving down there today. Share this video with anyone who has ever looked up at Mars and wondered if we are truly alone. Because after everything you just learned, the answer may be closer than anyone expected.